Hey guys, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be filming some book recommendations that are perfect for a rainy day. These books are especially atmospheric and cozy, and I feel like these would be great to read on a rainy day. It's currently very rainy here in Florida, and some furry friends are getting irritated because they can't go run outside. So yeah, today I'm going to be recommending some books. Can I help you? Luna had to be relocated because she kept chewing my foot. But anyways, the first book I have to recommend is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and this one is a very gothic, dreary classic that I absolutely love. So this book takes place in the muddy, dreary English moors in the 1800s, and it basically follows our two main characters, Kathy and Heathcliff, who are very obsessed with each other in a really gross way, and the story is kind of about how their obsession with each other ruined their relationship and the relationships of the people around them as well. When Kathy was a child, her father brought home Heathcliff because he went to the city, found Heathcliff as an orphan and brought him home, but kind of treated him like he was subservient garbage, and he just was very awful to him. But Kathy knows how awful her father is, so she and Heathcliff kind of find solace in each other, and then they become so disgustingly passionately obsessed with each other, and it's a very harrowing story. This book spans generations, and it follows Kathy and Heathcliff growing up, becoming adults, and then Kathy leaving Heathcliff for another richer man and then coming back to him, and then her on her deathbed, and then the relationship, how it affected their kids as well, and it's just a very complex story. So this one is definitely more on the moodier side, so if you're looking for something very dark, gothic, dreary, highly recommend this one. It's definitely not for the light of heart though, because it does have a lot of, like, you know, extreme themes in here of, like, there's tragedy, there's alcoholism, there's abuse in this book. So definitely keep that in mind. This book is just a very dark mess. So up next I have The Beautiful by Renee Attier, and this one is a YA historical fantasy that follows our main character Celine Rousseau, who flees her life as a dressmaker in Paris after kind of an incident, and she wants to get a fresh start, so she comes to New Orleans and joins a convent of nuns with other girls who are trying to get a fresh start in America. So while Celine is trying to inject herself into society, she ends up coming across a society called the Court of Lions, and this book is a vampire novel, so you can kind of see where this is going. So basically she becomes entangled with the Court of Lions, and she catches the eye of a very enigmatic Sebastian. There's also a string of murders that are happening around New Orleans, and Celine is kind of in the center of that. This is a very atmospheric, beautifully written story, and it kind of starts out slow, but it picks up towards the end, and there's surprisingly a lot of mystery and action, and there's a little bit of a romance as well, which I thought was very spicy in my opinion. So if you're looking for something that's really atmospheric and not quite so dreary as Wuthering Heights, for example, highly recommend this one. So fantastic. This one I felt like for me was everything that I wanted Twilight to be, and this just did it way better in my opinion. So yeah, really love this one. Up next I have one of my all-time favorite books, and that is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This one is a YA horror, and this one follows a group of girls who live on an island at a boarding school called Raxter High for girls, and basically a virus breaks out over the island that kind of deforms the girls' bodies, gives them second spines and scales and lesions, and they are cut off from the rest of the United States because of this virus. Girls aren't really supposed to leave the grounds of the school because the tox has also kind of infested the nature on the island and the animals, which make them more deadly, more aggressive, more deformed. So when our main character Hetty's best friend Byatt goes missing, Hetty knows something is wrong because the girls aren't supposed to leave the school grounds. So she launches a little investigation of her own to find out what happened to her best friend. I really love this book. It's definitely one of my favorites of all time. It's so eerie and creepy and just cringe-inducing, and I just absolutely love it. It's one of my favorites, and I cannot stress this enough. This is a basically queer feminist Lord of the Flies retelling, and if that doesn't make you want to read it, I don't know what will. This book has honestly really divided reviews, but I was on the loving it side of that spectrum. So yeah, this book might not be for everybody, but it was definitely for me. Keep in mind that this book has a lot of triggers. If you guys are interested in seeing the trigger warnings for any of these books, you can click the Goodreads link down below, and I post all of my reviews with trigger warnings at the end. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely go check that out. The next book I have is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. This is the first book in one of my favorite series of all time. This is a YA fantasy historical kind of series, and I absolutely love the series with my whole heart. It's definitely my favorite of all time, and it got me back into reading after not reading for 5 years, so I credit this series to a lot. So this one follows our main character Jacob, who basically, after his grandfather's mysterious death, he kind of falls down a rabbit hole of his grandfather's history, and he ends up coming upon an island full of peculiar children with peculiar abilities, and they're kind of suspended in time, and they knew his grandfather. And this is just a beautiful, mysterious story, and I absolutely love it. One thing that is really iconic about this series is that it has old photographs throughout, and they all play a part in the story. And Ransom Riggs is actually a vintage photo collector, and he gets a bunch of creepy, weird photos from around the world, and he incorporates them into his books. Like I said, this one is the first book in the series. There's currently 5 in publication, and the 6th one I think is due to publish either later this year in 2020 or in 2021. And I just love this series. It's full of so much history, fantasy. There's a large cast of characters, and they all have different like quirky things about them, and I just really love the series. And they go on so many fun adventures and beat up bad guys, and it's just a really great immersive world. All of these books are just on the kind of darker side of YA fantasy, just in terms of like the vibe of the atmosphere, so that's kind of like why I'm recommending this one. But yeah, absolutely love the series. Like I said, it's one of my favorites of all time. So up next I have another YA fantasy, and that is The Wicked Deep by Shea Earnshaw. This one I just absolutely fell in love with last year, and I actually read this in October, so it was spooky, and I also think I read this when it was raining outside, so this one is like a double recommendation because I read this when it was raining. But basically, like I said, this one is a YA fantasy, and it follows a small town called Sparrow, where in 1822 3 sisters were accused of witchery, and they basically got stones tied to their ankles, and they were cast to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And as revenge, every summer the 3 witches come back. They inhabit the bodies of 3 different islander girls, and then they lure boys to their death in the ocean. So this phenomenon in Sparrow has become a tourist spectacle because no one can figure out how to stop the witches from coming back every year, and the girls whose bodies get possessed have no memory of the event. So our main character Penny is determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, and I just absolutely love this book so much. It is so fantastical and creepy and page turning, and I just absolutely love any books that have to do with like witchy themes. And I just really love Shea Earnshaw's writing because it's very atmospheric, and you can tell that she personally has a connection with nature, and the way that she writes reflects that. In every one of her books I've read, I've just felt like I've been there. I could taste the salt on my mouth in this book, so definitely check this one out. One of my favorites of all time. So up next, if you're looking for kind of like a lighter recommendation, a lot of the ones I recommended already were like creepy, spooky, eerie, but that's just because I associate that with rainy days. But this one's kind of more of a cozier, feel-good book, and that is Stargazing by Jen Wang. This is a middle grade graphic novel that I read recently, and I absolutely loved it. It basically follows 2 Chinese American girls who become friends, and it's just a really, really cute story. So all I can say is that you should read it. I loved it. I laughed, I cried, I smiled, and overall it just made me feel super happy and warm and fuzzy, so I highly recommend this one. So up next I have A Curse of Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmer. This one is a YA fantasy that I absolutely love, and this one follows our main character Harper, who has cerebral palsy, and she lives a really difficult life in Washington DC with her family, and one day she accidentally gets whisked into the magical kingdom of Emberfall, where Prince Ren and his royal commander Grey are trapped in a powerful curse by an enchantress, and they're doomed to relive the season of autumn over and over again until it is broken by true love. So this one is actually a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I absolutely love this series so much. I've read the first 2 books. The 3rd one hasn't been published yet, but I just absolutely love it. I think that Bridget Kemmer does a really good job of making her world very atmospheric. She explores the political aspects of the world as well, and she's just really good at world building. Another thing she's really great at is character development. I feel personally connected to all the characters that she writes, and I just really love her stuff, so definitely check this one out if you're looking for a great YA fantasy. Up next, I have a thriller, and that is The Other People by C.J. Tudor. This one follows our main character, Gabe, who is on his way home from somewhere. I can't really remember where, but he was on his way home when he gets a call that his family has been murdered. So on his way home, he actually sees a car in front of him that has his daughter in the back seat, and so he knows for a fact that his daughter isn't dead, even though there is evidence of that and everyone else thinks that she's dead. So Gabe kind of just drives around at night on the highway trying to look for the car that he last saw his daughter in, because he's convinced that she's not dead. And I really liked this thriller. I think it was very fast paced. I couldn't put it down, and it also is kind of like more of a dreary thriller, because I feel like this one is just like a rainy vibe as a book, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed this one and I highly recommend it. There's also a little bit of a paranormal twist to it, so yeah, love this one so much. Up next, I have a book that I actually read very recently, and it's definitely going to be on my favorite books of 2020 list. Absolutely loved this book, and that is The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. This one is a YA fantasy standalone that is basically a reimagining of Wolfgang and Nannerl Mozart's life, and they are basically brother and sister. And this one more so specifically focuses on Nannerl, who was Wolfgang Mozart's sister, and she was also actually a prodigy, and she wanted to become a composer, but she couldn't because she was a woman. So Nannerl kind of makes a wish to get more recognition, and in doing so she kind of makes a deal with a devilish type named Hyacinth, and she basically has to do favors for him in the Kingdom of Back, which is a very magical, eerie, creepy kingdom that just manifests itself to Nannerl. And it's really weird because Nannerl and Wolfgang actually kind of created the Kingdom of Back just like out of the stories that they told. This book is really hard to describe, but it's absolutely beautiful. It is such beautiful writing, and it is so immersive, and I just felt like I was reading Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland, because this kind of read like a fairy tale in itself. And in real life, the real Wolfgang Mozart and Nannerl, on their tour across Europe to perform for kings and queens and noblemen, they actually verbally came up with a kingdom called the Kingdom of Back when they were bored. And so basically Marie Lu took that real chunk of history and turned it into this absolutely beautiful novel. So like I said, I can't say enough good things about this one. It's definitely been one of my favorites of the year so far, and it's just absolutely stunning, so definitely check this one out. So up next, I have Tales of the Peculiar by Ransom Riggs, and I actually just talked about another one of his books in this video, if you guys noticed. And this one is basically a companion to the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series, and these are like the peculiar fairy tales that are told to peculiar children instead of like Little Mermaid or Cinderella. So basically this is just a collection of creepy, strange stories that are very fairy tale-like in nature. And honestly, you don't have to have read the series in order to enjoy this, because I think that Ransom Riggs is such a natural storyteller, and just the fact that he was able to create such original fairy tales was just like absolutely amazing to read about. So I actually did read this one on a rainy day, so I definitely can double recommend this one just because I did read it on a rainy day. But yeah, this one's absolutely fantastic. It also has some illustrations throughout it, and it's just an absolutely beautiful book, so definitely check this one out. So up next, I have Stockhill Girls by Claire Legrand, and this one is kind of in the same vein as Wilder Girls. It takes place on an island called Stockhill Rock, where girls have been going missing, and our three main characters are kind of trying to unravel the mystery. I think this book had pretty good representation, honestly, in terms of like the LGBT characters, and I just think this was a really interesting story, and the more I read it, the more questions I had and the more I wanted to find out what was going to happen. And so I think it was very page turning and very entertaining, and just overall a very creepy, eerie read, and I just feel like this would be perfect for a rainy day. So the last couple books I'm going to recommend are ones that I either don't own physically or I couldn't find it on my bookshelf when I was about to film this video, so let's get into those couple of books. The first one is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, and this one is a historical fiction novel that I absolutely loved. This one takes place during World War II Germany, and it follows our main character, Lisel, who basically, after her mother gets sick and her brother passes away, she gets placed with a foster family, and it kind of is a coming of age story, but it's also very harrowing, like I said, because it takes place during World War II. Basically centers around Liselle trying to get her hands on books, which is really difficult for her to do because during World War II, a lot of books were burned in a ceremonial way. Anything that had to do with Hitler, like, it was just burned. And so it basically just follows Liselle trying to find books, and I absolutely loved this book so much, and it has a very like small town atmospheric vibe to it, so I just think this one would be absolutely perfect for a rainy day. Definitely make sure you're in the right headspace to read this one though, because it's definitely on the heavier side because of all the things that happen in it. But I think this is such an amazing novel, and I think it is definitely going to become a classic at some point just because it is so well written. So up next is House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. This one is a YA fantasy that is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, and it basically follows one of the sisters specifically, and her sisters are dying one by one, and they all look like accidents or like natural causes, but our main character knows that something is happening, something is not right, and there's something that is actively picking off the sisters. This one is very creepy and eerie and also magical at the same time, and there's some paranormal aspects as well. And overall, I think this was like a very captivating, dreary read, and I could taste the salt in my mouth when I was reading this because it kind of takes place on a salty island. So definitely check this one out. I feel like this would be absolutely fantastic for a rainy day. The next recommendation I have is Coraline by Neil Gaiman, and this one is a middle grade classic, and if you haven't read this book, you definitely should. It's so fantastic and creepy, and if you don't know what it's about, it basically follows our main character Coraline, whose parents are always seeming to be busy, so she kind of tries to find her own fun, and in doing so, she finds a secret door in her house that leads to kind of like a universe that is parallel to her own, and she has another mother, and it's just very creepy and disturbing and definitely not like any other like children's book I've read. So this one is just super captivating and very creepy, so definitely check this one out. So up next I have a book that I wasn't absolutely head over heels for, but I still really liked the story and I thought it was very entertaining and gripping, and that is Broken Things by Lauren Oliver. And this one is a YA mystery, and this one basically follows three girls, and one of their friends gets murdered, and basically the murder is placed on the other girls in the group because they were her closest friends, and they were also found at the scene with blood on their hands, so it kind of looks bad. They're kind of like the town pariahs, and so basically it's just about the girls trying to get to the bottom of what really happened and how their best friend died. So this one is just very like dread-inducing and also very eerie in its own right, because the girls in the book are obsessed with this kind of creepy novel that kind of inspired the events that led up to the murder. So overall, it's just a really creepy story, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really entertaining, so definitely check this one out. So I think that concludes all of my rainy day book recommendations. I think any of these books would be absolutely fantastic to read on a rainy day, especially now that it's kind of like the rain season, especially here in Florida. It's been raining a lot. So I just thought I would recommend some rainy day books. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like, subscribe down below, and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss a single upload, and have a great day. Bye!